was to cut out as much red meat out of my diet as possible, or all red meat and chicken. I did my best to cut out all processed foods. That was a lot harder than just cutting out the red meat. I had to change basically my entire diet plan. I ate a lot of chicken. I didn't eat a lot of red meat, but chicken was probably an everyday meal for me. My changes included going to the grocery store and buying tons of different foods. Instead of buying foods out, I tended to cook them at home instead, and eating a lot more vegetables and fish. So my diet changed completely from eating mostly chicken to eating mostly fish. Most of the stuff I ate on a regular basis was salmon. I ate a lot of tilapia. For breakfast in the morning, usually I just drank a cup of coffee, and I might have some like oatmeal, or I might grab some like blueberries or raspberries. At lunchtime, I ate a lot of peanut butter and crackers. The hardest meal was probably dinner time, trying to figure out what to eat because I don't cook. So it was a big learning process, along with just changing my meals too. Like I stated before, cooking was not my forte, so this was a big learning curve for cooking. When I cooked salmon, I would bake it because it cut out a lot of the fat content. Salmon doesn't have a lot of fat in it originally, but it did cut out a lot of that. In order to get enough protein, since I cut out all of my meat, I ate a lot of quinoa. I usually boiled it or microwaved it, so that wasn't too bad. I steamed a lot of vegetables, so I ate a lot of asparagus, which I baked, but I steamed broccoli and carrots, and a lot of times I would make rice, which was usually made in the microwave, or on the stove. It was usually brown rice, and I usually mixed in some vegetables like zucchini and stuff like that with it to make sure that I was getting all of the proteins I could. Along with cutting out all of my meats, I was losing a lot of my B12 content, so I took B12 supplements throughout the 4 weeks to make sure that I was getting enough of that supplement to sustain myself, since fish and all the other little things didn't have enough in it to really sustain me with my exercise and everything else that I did throughout the day. But other than that, it wasn't too bad, and it was nice getting to learn how to cook along the way.
Cutting down on meat or completely cutting out our meat consumption could be one of the most beneficial ways the world could help the environment. Currently, the overconsumption of meat is affecting our land, our water supply, and our pollution rates. Currently, the U.S. alone has deforested over 260 million acres of land and devoted it to the mass production of livestock. For every acre of land, about 250 pounds of beef is produced, which may seem like a lot, but is scarce when compared to the 50,000 pounds of tomatoes that can be produced from 1 acre of land. Along with deforesting and destroying our land, factory farming is also consuming all of our drinkable water. The average American eats roughly 54 pounds of beef, 46 pounds of pork, and 83 pounds of chicken per year. The water alone that it takes to produce just a pound of each one of these is about 1,799 gallons for beef, 576 gallons for pork, and 468 gallons for chicken. If one person gave up meat, that person would save around 162,486 gallons of water per year. About 70% of the water devoted to livestock is used to grow the grain to feed the livestock, as opposed to the livestock alone. Cutting down on meat consumption could also help with the current world hunger problem. 40% of the current wheat, rye, oat, and corn produced are being used for livestock growth that could be used to feed the malnourished people around the world. If every American stopped eating meat, there would be enough grain to feed 1.4 billion people. Currently, there are only 842 million undernourished people in the world. Along with natural resource use, factory farming, and also pollutes and destroys the earth. Livestock alone contributes to over half of the global greenhouse gas emissions each year. A recent study in The Guardian found that people who ate meat regularly contributed to over half the amount of carbon emissions as vegetarians or vegans did. Overall, the world would be impacted in a miraculous way if meat was cut out of everyone's diet, if even just for a week. I collected data through the course of about 6 weeks. Every day, I recorded everything I ate in a fitness app that recorded all of the data for each item for me. For the first 2 weeks, I ate my regular diet, and for the last 4 weeks, I switched over to the pescatarian diet, strictly fish meat and no other red meat or chicken. I recorded the calories, carbs, fat, protein, cholesterol, sodium, sugar, and fiber content changes for each week and compared. I found that I consumed a significantly less amount of fat, sugars, and sodium, and I had a lot more fiber in my diet. My calorie intake remained about the same, and my protein content dropped drastically. I made sure to take B12 supplements throughout the 4 weeks in order to ensure that I was still getting the correct nutrients. Throughout the first week on the pescatarian diet, I did feel a little sluggish. I think this is because my body was going through the withdrawal from my previous diet of high sugars and fats. But after week 2, I felt much more energized and healthy than when I was on my original diet. Changing over from mostly a chicken and small amount of turkey and pork diet to a strictly fish diet was much easier than I originally expected. The hardest part of the project was learning how to cook and keeping myself from eating out as much while on and around campus. If Clemson students alone switched over to just a pescatarian diet, the change would be felt more so individually as the students, I think. In Clemson, in particularly, we don't have any factory farming, so if we were to take out all the beef consumption, as far as environmental, we wouldn't see very many changes. But when I changed over from my mostly chicken and beef based diets, I felt much more healthier. I had more energy. I cut out a lot of fats and sugars, so I feel it would make our students a lot more healthy and maybe even happier with the change that they've made. For the world, if the world were to change from eating no meat, we would impact everything. The land, we'd have more land for population. Our population is expected to grow to about triple by 2100, and we currently don't have the land to support them. And right now, about 30% of our land alone is being used for factory farming and livestock feed production. And if we were to cut that out completely, we'd have so much more room for the people that are expected to come into the world in the near future. Along with that, we would cut down on our emissions. The livestock accounts for over 50% of emissions that we currently have in the world. If we were to cut them out, it would be like cutting out most of the automobile emissions that we have today, and our lives would just be happier through the reduction of smog and pollutants in the air. The concepts of global warming would no longer be an issue, at least not nearly as much as they are now. We would be able to save the water. We're currently in a very large drought, and our water is not being supplemented as it should. Our water is being given mostly to animals to feed us and to their grains to feed them, as opposed to the grains being fed to us or the water being given to us as it should. So as a whole, if we were to completely cut out the consumption of meat and chicken as the world, it would make an amazing change for everything and everyone. Clemson in general, as I said before, I think would be more of an individualist feeling. We would just feel better about our diets, and we would be happier students if we weren't happy enough as it is. Taking into consideration the large amounts of meat that Americans and the world in general are consuming on a daily basis, it would not be a socially accepted or economically feasible concept for me to ask everyone to just cut meat out of their diet. It wouldn't be socially accepted, and it's just way too radical of a concept. Cutting meat out of our diets would very well impact the environment, and it would be great on cutting down all of our emissions and our pollutants. And it's not a needed nutrient in our bodies. With the technology and supplements we have today, we really don't need meat in our diets. And the benefits of cutting it out would definitely outweigh our personal felt preferences of wanting it in our diets. However, that being said, I think that a practical and hopefully socially accepted concept for my project would be to cut meat out for one day a week. Currently, there's a project going around called Meatless Mondays. The whole concept is to just cut red meats and chicken out of your diet for just one day a week. It doesn't have to be on Mondays, it's whatever works with your schedule. But if every American or human being in the world were to cut meat out of their diet for just one day a week, the impacts on the reduction of factory farming and the overconsumption of meat would be immense. Currently, we consume about 54 pounds of meat annually as Americans per person. If one person were to just say that one day a week they weren't going to eat meat, that would be cut into thirds, and we would cut down our overconsumption a large amount. I don't think that this is too radical of a concept. It wouldn't require anybody to be losing large amounts of money because the other 6 days of the week, everyone is still eating beef or whatever they prefer. And it would still make a great enough impact on the environment to make some sort of a change and work towards an even greater change. The concept behind Norton's weak anthropocentric ideal is that humans need to take into consideration humans that had not yet been born. Before Norton, it was hard for philosophers to come up with a concept that would account for future people and give a reason as to why. Norton proposes the idea that humans need to leave the environment in a state conducive to the flourishing of human consciousness. This means we as humans should not completely deplete all of our resources and leave no means of survival for future humans. He presents the analogy of a trust fund. The current trust is that the current humans will leave the environment sustainable for other humans. The executor is the current humans. The principal is the non-renewable resources, and the interest on principal is that future humans will be able to sustain themselves. If we as humans continue to deplete and pollute the environment through factory farming, we are by no means adhering to this concept. Factory farming depletes our non-renewable resources and leaves nothing for future humans except for wastelands of what used to be overly farmed cattle, pork, and chicken. By Norton's environmental ethic of weak anthropocentrism, it is not ethically right for humans to continue the overconsumption of meat and factory farming. Paul Taylor's biocentric concept is an individualistic, egalitarian concept that takes into consideration the mistreatment of animals through factory farming. Taylor's biocentric outlook on nature is a biologically informed philosophical worldview about humans, nature, and the place of human civilization in the natural world. Taylor believes that humans need to give up the concept that we rule over all of the natural world and understand that we are just as vulnerable as the other living beings we claim to control. Humans are new to the world in comparison to many of the other creatures currently inhabiting it, and we have no right to think the earth was created solely for our survival. However, we do need to note that without nature and other forms of life, we would not be here. The other forms of life by no means depend on us as we do for them for survival. Another part of Taylor's concept involved acknowledging that all organisms have interests centered on their personal survival. Or in other words, all living organisms have sentience and a right to live. The largest part of Taylor's concept involves proving that humans do not have the superiority we give ourselves. Although humans hold capacities, non-humans do not. The non-humans also hold capacities that we do not. We as humans cannot justify the right to superiority over non-humans. Because of this, it is not ethically right for us to farm animals as we do. We have the right to use these animals purely for our basic survival needs, but we have surpassed this. Factory farming produces large amounts of food that we cannot justify as absolutely needed for our survival. Along with this, the torture and pain the animals are subjected to during factory farming keep the animals from their own right to survive. Animals born in factory farming are not given the option of escape and are almost immediately slaughtered for their meat, simply because humans think they have the right to do whatever they please with whatever resources they can find. Because of Taylor's biocentric concept, it is morally wrong for humans to persist in the torture of animals for overconsumption due to their right to survival and our unjust concept of superiority.